Too hot for TV.
Welcome back to Doctor Who Too Hot for TV. We are the podcast that looks at all things Doctor Who Extended Universe. Now, we've been doing a run of episodes all about the Doctor Who replacements, could-have-beens of the 90s, with me, Jackson, and a variety of guests. And Jackson was supposed to be here to do this final episode, but his knees were playing up, so he shot his starry load out of the TARDIS into time and space and turned into a familiar face. Unfortunately, it's not Billy Piper. Instead, I'm joined by Mark Donaldson.
Hello, that's me, the Billy Piper of Doctor Who podcasting. I don't know what that means. I popularised it.
Yeah, you made it cool in the first place, and we all followed in your footsteps. That's what it is.
Indeed.
I am the Freema Adjuman to your Billy Piper.
What, in the sense that you've gone off to America and become way more successful than... Yeah.
Exactly. So, we did this run looking at the not who's of the 90s, and I thought it'd be nice to sort of round things up by looking at something a little closer to home in the sort of could-have-beens of the 90s. But I want to start with the Leekley Bible, and there's no news at the time or anything like that for that, because it is a thing that was written in an office somewhere in LA that is a history of a new version of Doctor Who. It's a pitch document. Can you remember when you first became aware of the Gospel according to John Leekley?
It would have been, God, I don't know, to be honest, because it was kind of doing the rounds for a while, because I remember it was printed in that Regeneration book.
Yeah.
And I think I'd heard rumblings, but I never kind of really sat down and properly read it, I don't think, until recently.
I don't think I did either. It showed up in that, was mentioned in the Nth Doctor, but the Nth Doctor was more interested in the scripts that had been written for the pilots, which were sort of reviewed and synopsised in there. And I got a vague recollection that in the early days of the internet you could find mentions of it, but not like the full thing or anything, just like this pitch document for this version of Doctor Who that was Hollywood Doctor Who, and it was gonna happen.
Yeah, like on Records or something like that.
Yeah.
You'd probably, yeah.
Because it's this bizarre thing in the 90s that Philip Siegel was talking to the fans all throughout his development stage in a way that you wouldn't now. He'd do conventions, he'd do interviews with magazines, and we're talking probably from about 93 to 96 when it actually happened. He's trying to keep a good relationship with the fans in order to I guess, do a bit of promo for himself and the show. So bits of it do leak out in a way that you would never give plot points now.
No, I don't think you would. I mean, although I think... So I wrote my dissertation on the impact of the internet and social media on kind of film culture and film criticism, particularly film criticism. But I did a whole, well, not a whole chapter on Snakes on a Plane, but that was one of the big examples that I took as kind of a point at which it was like an industry website had gone, oh, there's this mad film that somebody's got a script for called Snakes on a Plane. And the internet just like jumped on this thing, and it became this whole massive thing. And then when the film actually came out, nobody gave a fuck, because we'd all been like, all the jokes you could have made about that film had been made in the sort of build up to it. So yeah, it's and I think the Leekley Bible, there's a bit of that. It's like all the stuff you hear about it. Yeah. It's all very exciting, and then you actually sit down and read it, and you're like, this is not good as a version of Doctor Who.
So how is the Leekley Bible presented for people who may not have read it?
It's a bit mad, isn't it? So I've read the pitch documents for Star Trek: The Original Series and Star Trek: The Next Generation, and they're very much like, this is what Star Trek is. This is where it's set. This is how the ship's built. This is how the crew all work together. The Leekley Bible is written from the perspective of Lord Barusa off of The Deadly Assassin. And I feel like we're going to come to The Deadly Assassin quite a lot.
It's got a lot to answer for.
Episodes. So it's Barusa sort of retelling the history of the Time Lords, the sort of political machinations that are currently taking place in the Citadel following his death, and the story of the Doctor and his search for his father, Ulysses.
Yeah, it's that classic Doctor Who story that we all know and love so well.
Yeah.
Does it feel like a Doctor Who... I mean, you say it's not very good, and, it's hard to argue with that. Does it feel like a Doctor Who suitable for the 90s, though, and an American television?
So, I don't think it does. Because I think, jumping ahead, there's a comment Mark Gatiss makes in his pitch, which we'll talk about later, about how American shows in the 90s, they're kind of in the cast promos are interchangeable. It's a sort of cast of uniformed characters, and you can just basically, it's like either Roy Scheider or Patrick Stewart or Avery Brooks, and you just kind of swap those heads and it all looks the same. They're all kind of ensemble pieces. But crucially, I would say, they're all set in kind of believable worlds. I mean, DS9's got like a big mythology to it, but they eke that out over 7 years, and it only really kind of gets in depth into that in its 6th and 7th year where they go, well, the audience is going with us, let's go for it.
Yeah.
This sets up. I mean, I suppose you've got, in the finished TV movie, you've got elements of the Leekley Bible. Yeah. There is a kind of info dump about Gallifrey and regeneration and all that kind of thing. But I think it's a big ask of an audience, of an American audience, particularly where I think, like, look at Back to the Future, I think Back to the Future shows you what, like, an American Doctor Who that would still be kind of like the Doctor Who we know and love, but American. It would basically be a Marty McFly style character forms this kind of bond with a kind of old eccentric professor doing experiments. That's surely your Doctor Who rather than this mad political thriller.
It's obsessed with the lore of the show. And I know this is setting up the mythos, but it doesn't tell you what the show can do. It is like going, what's the first episode of your reboot of Doctor Who? Oh, it's The Deadly Assassin. That's where we're going to start. Or War Games episode 10. It's like, you have to earn these things. The reason that Hellbent and Heaven Sent work at the end of Series 9 is because we've had 9 seasons of sort of building to this stuff. Had that been instead of Rose, it would have been a disaster, no matter how good they are.
Well, Hellbent and Heaven Sent are 10 years in. So it's your 10th anniversary special. It's kind of, or I know it's not a special, but it's a sort of episode of the season. It's your 3 Doctors, Yeah. It's when the new series kind of goes, all right, let's dig a bit deeper into the lore. Because we've earned that right. We've been around for 10 years.
And I think you are right. It's not the right template for the show. I think what's interesting is me and Liam covered a little bit the sort of pilots they wrote for this version of the show. The pilots work better than the Bible, but it is this thing of putting lore before actually having a good story. And this Leekley Bible doesn't even really mention a companion. It doesn't really mention adventure. Like, we'll get to the synopsis shortly, but it is just obsessed with telling you this weird story. It's Cain and Abel, isn't it? The Doctor and the Master as brothers.
Exactly, yeah.
Warring in a sort of political background.
Well, then the mad thing is it starts off kind of saying the Doctor's in his 8th incarnation. So you go, oh, okay, so this is a continuation. But then it's like, oh, no, like, so this is all, it is kind of a new history for the show. It is a complete hard reset. But also, we've got to get him up to the 8th incarnation. It's a very odd sort of little thing. And also, you talk about, there's no mention of companions, there's no mention of kind of, I suppose, adventuring, but also the villains. Every single villain in this just ends up getting tied to the Master.
Yeah, the Daleks are very much what the Cybermen become in the new series of just, they're the Master's army of things that you send out there. Like, there's nothing particularly special about the Daleks in any way, shape or form. As cool as they fucking look as Spider Daleks.
Which is weird because, well, that's it, the Spider Daleks. And the version of Genesis of the I know we said we get synopses in a second, but the version of Genesis of the Daleks they get, I can see that as like a decent 90s kind of grungy sci-fi remake of Genesis of the Daleks. But then at the end, the Master shows up, and it was him all along who wanted the Doctor to get the Daleks to a certain point so he could use them as his soldiers, and then they just lose all interest.
Yeah, it's really odd. I mean, let's jump into the synopsis while we're here. I think that Genesis of the Daleks kind of works as a season finale. Like, it would be madness to do it that early on, but it is something that happens in the pilot, that they sort of go to Skaro and retell it. But yeah, I can absolutely see it working, even if the Master stuff is bollocks, basically.
Yeah.
What about the other adaptations that it presents of Doctor Who stories? Because there's one that I want to fucking see.
Is it the 1990s Talons of Wen-Chiang?
Absolutely. Set in New York, with the Doctor bodying up with a local policeman.
Yeah, I mean, we recently watched that cop movie where it's like he's
The Hidden, was it?
The Hidden, that's it.
Yeah.
So like I can see it. I can see Doctor Who being sort of thrown into a kind of NYPD Blue episode where they're tracking down mysterious deaths and things like that. I can't quite see them getting away with the Chinese gang element of it.
Weirdly, though, the Chinese gang element is something that makes it into the TV movie, though.
Good point. I hadn't really thought about that. But yeah, because they're not called the Black Tongue Gang or whatever it is. But I mean, it is essentially a Chinese gang. Yeah, that's true.
People love Chinese gangs in the 90s. We get the Pirates, which isn't really a remake of the Smugglers, but I guess, you sort of squint and it is. Earthshock. Now, you take a pivotal story like Earthshock in the Doctor Who canon, and, I mean, not all of these were necessarily meant to be... It's not 100% they would have remade them. It was more a sort of thing of going, this is what the stories could be like.
Yeah, which is fairly standard for a pitch document, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you would know better than me. But that is a fairly standard thing. You have a bunch of story ideas. So I guess it's a bit lazy, but I guess it makes sense to pluck some of the best stories from the classic era to go, well, we could do this. We could do like a faster 90s-y version. 90s-y? That's not a thing. Faster 90s version of these kind of classic stories. And I think I'm not somebody who thinks that that's sacrilege. I think if you've got a good idea, then go for it. Especially if you are going to do a complete hard reset on the mythology and the lore.
If they reset Doctor Who, I'd have no problem with them remaking old stories. I think it's inevitable at some point, but we shall see. But Earthshock uses a chance to reimagine the Cybermen. This is an odd reimagining of the Cybermen, right?
On paper, it's an interesting idea. I would quite like to see it. That there's Cybermen that they take the idea that the Cybermen sort of used technological advancements to improve themselves for survival, but they flip it and they go, well, no, this is the 90s. So what would they do? They would use that technology to make themselves sort of more beautiful and more like just better. So they're really vain, and they're these kind of there's drawings of them, and they're these kind of sort of cyberpunky kind of scavengers. So they're not really the Cybermen. They are kind of they're kind of the Cybermen in the sense that they appear in all the Cybermen plots that they've put in this pitch document. But in terms of the concept and in terms of the look, it does feel like a kind of you could get away with doing a kind of new villain or like an offshoot, like a little kind of. Oh, there was like another subculture on Mondas that was doing this instead of what the Cybermen were up to.
But I guess tapping into sort of 90s popular cult, not even popular, 90s sort of fears, and we took like that's when it felt like plastic surgery was really a big thing for the first time. And in the 60s it was about replacing limbs and stuff like that. You can see why they get there, but again, it doesn't need to be a Cyberman story. And who knows, maybe it would have evolved into something that wasn't.
Well, and crucially, they don't call them Cybermen. They call them Cybes, which is, I think it needs to go back to the drawing board in terms of the name. But
And then they do the Yeti, who are sort of a missing link in human evolution in this version.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure. I mean, that sounds like a Doctor Who story.
It definitely does, yeah. And the Dalai Lama's in it.
Yeah, because you need a celebrity historical. I can only imagine Doctor Who fans losing their shit at all of this. But there's a sick twisted part of me that wants to see all these stories. Take Doctor Who, the thing that we loved, and destroy it. Turn it into this monstrosity.
Turn it into the most interminable, lore-heavy sci-fi show you've ever seen in your life. But then maybe it wouldn't have been. No. I just think that the pitch document it really puts the lore, and it puts it gives a whole arc that the idea is that the Doctor finds his dad to prove that he's a Time Lord, so that he can go back and take over Gallifrey and run Gallifrey as a kind of benevolent dictator, essentially.
Yeah.
It's a weird arc to give the character.
But I think in the pilots that I read, most of that's done and dusted with by the end of the pilot, apart from, I think he finds his dad for a bit and then doesn't find him and then goes on a quest for him. And
because the Pirates one, he's in it. You meet Ulysses on the pirate ship because he's Blackbeard or whatever it is, and then he disappears.
I mean, it's not a bad idea for a series. I don't quite know how Doctor Who it is. I think 12-year-old me would have loved it.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, probably, actually. Probably. I just think I watched the first ever episode of Sliders today as a kind of, because in my head I was like, well, this was around the same time.
Yeah.
And I feel like Sliders was more Doctor Who
than the
TV movie, and it kind of was. I mean, it was obviously, it wasn't. I forgot that it's Jerry O'Connell's character that comes up with the machine rather than John Rhys Davis's scientist. But you could see them flipping that dynamic and having that kind of same mentor-mentee dynamic. They go off to mad worlds every week. It's an ensemble. Like it felt a lot more like Doctor Who than this does.
Yeah. This is Doctor Who, the action series, isn't it? And Doctor Who's big on action, but I wouldn't say action adventure is what sort of people call it. But it's not really that. There's a lot of standing around in rooms, whereas this feels like this is Doctor Who jumping through time vortexes, running past explosions, seeing the whole of time and space in every episode. It's sort of like the intro to a Stephen Moffat episode, but just spread out as a whole thing. The Doctor smoked a cigar at one point.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it?
So, I'm in this new Doctor, probably played by Paul McGann, being a cigar smoker. Why not?
Because is it not in like, it's not a Pyramids of Mars remake, is it? But he's like, oh no, there is kind of like a mummy thing.
Yeah.
Because the line is, oddly, the Doctor seems very pleased. He is seated among the other mummies, smoking a cigar and relating the events of his life. Just like he's an old, just he's got his smoking jacket on, he's got his glass of brandy and a cigar, telling mad stories about travelling in time and space. Really weird.
To some 1,000-year-old corpses. There's nothing weird about that. There's some dialogue in there. Now, this isn't pulled directly from a script, I don't think. It's just, here's an example of Barusa, who's telling this tale to us, goes, and then this happened. And when you read that dialogue, do you think that sounds like Doctor Who?
No. It sounds like what people think Doctor Who sounds like. To me, that was my first note, was that this dialogue's rubbish.
It feels almost like a fan film.
Yeah. You've got a guy just holding his lapels,
smoking
delivering the lines.
It's an odd document. There's obviously some illustrations in there which range from bizarre to the most magical things you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk through some of these illustrations. What are the standout ones for you?
For me, we'll go with the original illustrations rather than the things that they've cribbed, which I suppose we'll get to in a second. I think the TARDIS looks amazing.
Yeah.
That kind of big sort of window out onto everything. Yeah. That's a really cool concept. It wouldn't have looked anything like that on the telly, but
I think you can see the genesis of the TV movie console in it. It's like, we're going to make it massive. But then they've obviously gone, this is a television budget. Even £5 million for the 90-minute pilot doesn't get you this. So go more Time Machine and we'll just make the space bigger. And then, they've got the big domed roof in that one, which works really well. 5-sided console? Someone's got a Dapol toy at home?
They've got those. Yeah, that's exactly how they've done it, isn't it? They've gone, right, okay, that's my base. And the big and the crystals, I mean, that's quite impressive as well. It does look quite cool.
And later on, there's a picture sort of in the doors on some alien world, probably Gallifrey, and that feels a little bit more like, oh, that's more like the TARDIS of the TV movie, right?
Definitely.
And then we get Gallifrey looking like Gallifrey pretty much always looks.
Always does, yeah.
It's been consistently that everywhere apart from the classic series for many, many years.
Yeah.
I remember these pictures being printed in Regeneration and the ones of the Cybes and stuff.
What I also quite like, though, it does have a kind of floor plan of the TARDIS as well.
Because the ship is 5-sided as well.
Yes. So it's got your living quarters, steering control, library and science lab, the infinity chamber, which I think is the zero room, essentially, is it?
Yeah.
The cloisters, and then the engine room, which I suppose, again, kind of, the engine room is the Eye of Harmony, I suppose, and the cloisters, so that side of it does kind of remain in the TV movie.
You get the feeling that perhaps Leekley and Siegel had watched a lot of the key Tom Baker episodes, so Legopolis, Deadly Assassin, Invasion of Time, and gone, this is the key to what Doctor Who's about, and not gone say, what we could just do the android to Tara, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much, it's about a guy who's got a massive spaceship and he's from a planet of politicians. What I find interesting is there's like a little bullet pointed, like, who's who, as in, who is Doctor Who? What is Doctor Who? Why should you sign on to Amblin's Doctor Who TV series? And, it's got the usual stuff, longest running sci-fi series in history, 650 episodes produced. Now, this is an interesting fact. A Doctor Who convention is held every week somewhere in the world. Is that true? Because I can well believe it. And I believe now it's probably 3 Doctor Who conventions are held every week somewhere in the world. And Colin Baker's somehow at every single one.
Him and Colin Spall. I think that is bollocks. But it was the 90s. Nobody had the internet to check.
Yeah.
So,
check it,
because I feel like you're right now with Comic Cons and stuff, you could tenuously go, there's a Doctor Who convention every week. But I feel like in the 90s in the UK, there was probably one every month. One.
Yeah, probably.
In the early 90s. And there was 2 or 3 in America, maybe one in Australia, one in Canada, and I think that was it. So one a week is a big push.
Unless they've just been pub meetings, in which case.
In which case, 650 episodes sort of scans, seen in 88 countries around the world, sure. Estimated worldwide audience of 150 million viewers. Yeah,
where are they getting those numbers from is what I want to... I guess you're pulling it from PBS and the BBC and...
Yeah,
other...
I think that's an exaggeration. And are we talking a new series of Doctor Who? Are we talking at its peak when Tom Baker was the Doctor? Or are we saying that while McCoy was playing and PBS were running Androids of Tara every week? Like, how do you calculate those? 126 licensed merchandise lines. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I'm not counting them. 125 novels have been published. Well, there are 150 target
Bloody hell. I mean, yeah.
And the new adventures have started, we know, because they steal some artwork from them for this.
Yeah, they do. And they do steal it, because I checked. I wanted to check the 2 artists that were credited in the production pitch. And obviously, they're the guys that have done all the Cybes and the TARDIS interior and all that kind of thing. They are not the guys who designed the covers for the Virgin New Adventures books. Cat's Cradle Witchmark is that one with the unicorn and the cat. And then is it Birthright?
Witchmark was Peter Elson.
Weirdly, they used that cover to illustrate the TARDIS exterior.
Yeah.
And it's like, wouldn't you be a bit more distracted by the unicorn and the sort of silver cat?
So they illustrate the TARDIS with that. And it's a cool picture, I get why. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily in keeping with the pitch.
No.
We also get an illustration of the TARDIS at some point, which I believe is cribbed off the Unearthly Child Target book or the Keys of Marinus. But,
right, okay.
But, it's much of a muchness. And
we also get a picture of the Valiard from Trail of the Time Lords.
Yes, and what's he representing?
The Master, apparently. That's what the Master's going to look like.
Now, I'm wondering, is it a mistake or have they gone, well, we don't want the Master to look like the the Master of the 80s. We want him to look like a Time Lord, so this makes
That's what I think they've done, yeah. I think that's exactly what they've done.
We get various pictures of the TARDIS, and it's littered with pictures of spider Daleks, which
look cool as fuck.
They do look cool as fuck, but actually they're not mentioned a huge amount within the document. It's like they've gone, what's the iconography of Doctor Who? Well, it's the Daleks. But actually, we don't quite know what to do with them.
There's a really cool one of like, it basically looks like that the regeneration arc or whatever it is from Army of Ghosts.
Oh yes, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
It's got like Davros's face inside it.
Yeah,
that looks pretty cool.
Well, I like this sort of evolution of it where it sort of glides in, and there was that little bit of CGI, wasn't there, that sort of did the rounds as a tester.
Yeah,
it glides in like an old school Dalek, and then does something else, and can fly, and has got a sort of Davrosy thing inside, and they do look very cool. I know Doctor Who fans think it's sacrilege to ever redesign the Daleks, but to be honest, if the Daleks showed up in Christmas 2026 and they look like that,
they might fucking have to. I mean, also what's interesting is the illustration of the Tomb of Rassilon, because obviously part of the pilot would be the Doctor finding his way to the Tomb of Rassilon and getting the scrolls of Rassilon that would prove...
Which nobody on Gallifrey could find, despite this hugely advanced race, and the Doctor finds it first time.
But it's it's Tom Baker. The illustration is the hat and the big scarf, which, kind of fits in with that whole thing of like they would want Tom Baker to come back to kind of
to hand
smooth over the transition.
God, can you imagine? Yeah.
One thing I thought was interesting in a sort of post-Timeless Child world is this section here. The Doctor, my grandson, because of course Barusa is the Doctor's granddad.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Why not? The Doctor, my grandson, was unique to us in so many ways, and it is fitting and proper that he would have begun his life in adventure and romance and tragedy. He is the only Time Lord that ever lived who was born on another planet. Although he was never told this, I think he somehow knew. That is quite a nice description of the character. And then obviously, that is the character now, because we know that they're not of Gallifrey, and the Flux has that whole thing of how the Doctor is kind of constantly kind of rebelling against sort of the Time Lords, regardless of what incarnation they are.
And ultimately, the half-human arc was present in the TV movie to be explored maybe later down the line. So I do think that works. They talk about Ulysses getting lost in time and giving up his Time Lord heritage and his regenerations to be with a peasant woman, as they say. But I like that one of the lines says, a lot of the early Gallifreyan explorers were lost in time. And I thought, that's the thing I'm interested in there more than anything else. Like, not necessarily that I want the Doctor to go looking for them, but that there could be these wizened old Time Lords that have become emperors or paupers or gods in various places. I think that's an interesting story that the show's...
I think there's a more interesting version of this where you do that Last of the Time Lords thing, and it is the Doctor by themselves, but there are other Time Lords out there that have been lost.
Yeah.
And so you can sort of build in that mythology, and then ultimately you kind of do the DS9 Dominion thing, spoiler alert. Oh, it turns out it was your people all along. You could do some fun, interesting, dramatic stuff with that.
Yeah.
So there's some good ideas in here. I just think it's not the version of Doctor Who that I particularly like.
No, and I've said this before, but I think TV shows now do rely heavily on lore, but you don't give it all in episode 1 or your first series, You build it up, and that's what gets people more interested, especially if there's a back catalogue. They'll go, I want to find out about this, that, and the other. Even with something like the Reality War, which wherever you stand on it, it's not an episode 1.
On its fucking throat.
Yeah, quite. Do you have much more you want to say on John Leekley's Bible? Because I've just been John Leekley's Bible, because why not?
It's a really interesting glimpse into like what somebody kind of sees as like what Doctor Who could be in the 1990s. Because I suppose as much as I say, oh, well, it should be more Back to the Future or more Sliders, it is trying to be its own unique thing. And I suppose that's what Doctor Who should always do. So, yeah, fair play.
So we will rate this one. As a take on Doctor Who, is it a clanger, a banger, or an average meander?
I think it's got a clanger for me. I think it just gets too many things wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think. And I think a version of this, I mean, I suppose we kind of get a version of this, but it's a much more safe, a much more romantic and fun version of it. I just don't think it would have lasted very long. I think it would have been a weird little curio.
I think it's 2 series max, like if that, or
Yeah.
just 24 episodes, ends on a cliffhanger, never resolved.
Yeah. And then we would get Doctor Who back and it would pick up from McCoy.
Yeah.
And then this would be this would live in a kind of weird Peter Cushing adjacent world, I think, is what we'd probably get.
And then when Eccleston turned down doing Day of the Doctor, it would have been the Doctor from this they got in.
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go. I was on Finish Big recently, and they said pick a what if for Doctor Who. And this isn't quite it, but I would like a Big Finish series, I know, be careful what you wish for, that did the pilot scripts for this, the Lost series, Lost Stories, and then did those adaptations that are discussed in the Leekley Bible. And even if they were terrible, I think I would have a great time. And it's got to be done 50-minute episodes in the style of 90s American television.
Cast an American.
Yeah, cast an American. Get Matthew Jacobs to write some. Get a couple of other 90s American writers. And just as a what-if box set, I think that's one of the few things left for Big Finish to do.
Yeah, I'd probably subscribe, to be honest, to that.
No, me too.
For everything I've just said, I'd be like, no, I'm intrigued to actually see it. Because I am like you. I do have that kind of sick part of my brain that's just like, no, I know this would be rubbish, but I would still want to experience it.
Yeah, but also, as someone who picked up a lot of fanzines and stuff in the 90s, I remember picking up bits of this stuff and going, oh, this would probably be brilliant, a big American blockbuster Doctor Who, because I think I was still at that age where, like, the idea of anybody seeing Delta and the Bannermen was really embarrassing. But if anybody asked me what's Doctor Who's like, I'd go, Caves of Androzani. And so this fulfills my sort of early teen fan wish for Doctor Who to be that big, epic American sci-fi show, which we all know it shouldn't be.
Yeah, we learned that lesson once again.
Too hot for TV.
The next thing we're going to look at is an article from Doctor Who magazine 279 called We're Going to Be Bigger Than Star Wars, which was released in the DWM that was released on the 3rd of June 1999. News at the time. Curse of the Fatal Death was getting a video release, and the new company Big Finish had announced their first non-multi-Doctor stories, Phantasmagoria, The Sound of Fear, and The Fearmonger. So
it'll never last.
It'll never last. And the latest wholly nonsensical piece of tittle-tattle concerning new Doctor Who, as reported in national tabloids late in April, claims BBC bosses have approved plans for a £2.5 million animated version of Doctor Who. Quoting the now traditionally anonymous Beeb Insider, the report maintained that top names from the original TV series like Tom Baker and Louise Jameson have already been approached to provide voices for the cartoon characters. Sadly, DWM have no reason to believe that this tale is anything more than a flight of journalistic fancy.
Was it, or was it that one that mad woman kind of
Karen McCoy
willed into existence?
No, I think this is different because Karen McCoy was very much using the 8th Doctor.
Because I remember there was mention of there would be other Doctors in it.
Maybe.
But yeah, maybe it's completely different.
Well, Karen McCoy, I remember taking up some serious column inches in DWM, so they were obviously at this point dismissing it, whatever it was.
Yeah, had their fingers burned. Although I could imagine a animated Doctor Who series with Tom Baker in the 90s.
Absolutely. Like, it baffles me why it hasn't been done. I know that the CBeebies are doing it in 2029 or whatever, but,
Oh, yeah. I'd forgotten about that.
Got to keep that brand alive.
It's been a very long year.
Can you believe we had a full series of Doctor Who earlier in the year?
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Coming soon, we've got the ball between the land and the sea. So. Anyway, releases at the time from BBV, we had The Choice featuring The Mistress and K9 and Autumn 3 Awakening. We had the Bernie Summerfield book Tears of the Oracle from Virgin Publishing. From BBC Books, we had A Natural History featuring the 8th Doctor Sam and Fitz, and Storm Harvest featuring the 7th Doctor and Ace. Also, on the front cover of Doctor Who magazine was the audio documentary Talking About My Regeneration, and the comic strip in the same magazine was Road to Hell, featuring the 8th Doctor and Izzy.
Too hot for TV.
So, bigger than Star Wars.
Mm.
This is an article where it gets together a bunch of Doctor Who fans / writers who also work in TV to discuss what a future series of Doctor Who might look like. Have you read this before?
Yeah, I read it at the time. I remember being fascinated by it because, like, I would have been. So was this 99? So I would have. When did you say it was in 99? Sorry,
It was June.
June. So yeah, so I would have been 13 and a half. I wouldn't have known who Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat were.
Nobody
But-
was. They weren't interesting names to us.
Yeah, and Paul Cornell, maybe, because I was obsessed with the cover of Time Worm Revelation. I remember I used to just look at that for ages, and John Menzies. But it was the idea that Doctor Who magazine was telling me that these people were fans. I would have seen League of Gents, so Gatiss would have been the name that I would have probably kind of cottoned onto. So yeah, that idea of like, oh, these are people in the industry. Like, and I was fascinated by television and television production at this point. Still am. Do a fucking podcast about it. So that idea of like these guys know what they're talking about, and they're also Doctor Who fans. This is going to be a really interesting read, and it was. It really was. But I think I read it again quite recently, like a couple of years ago, maybe. Probably for something I was writing. I went back to kind of look at what was being said, and it is very oddly prophetic.
Yeah, it's weird how a bunch of Doctor Who fans who are professionals can see what the future of Doctor Who looks like, but the industry just isn't quite ready for it at that point.
Yeah.
These guys are very much at the beginning of their careers, and there's nobody in a high enough position to go, if we do what it says here, we might have a success on our hands.
Yeah. Because it was 2 years before RTD would meet Lorraine Heggessy, isn't it? I think that was 2001. They have a kind of brief meeting about what he'd like to do at the BBC.
Oh, that was 2000, because there was an article, what we're doing next is Doctor Who 2001. There was Doctor Who 2000, as it was called very briefly, in DWM, which was Russell. And then I think Russell goes in again a year later.
Right, okay.
But yeah, we're just not quite there. So it talks about bigger than Star Wars and how Phantom Menace is everywhere. When Phantom Menace, which was arguably the biggest sci-fi moment of the 90s,
It's huge.
when it was released and it was everywhere, like it was massive.
Yeah.
Did it feel like that could be a point where Doctor Who could make a return?
No, it's a very thin premise for an article.
Yeah.
Like when I was reading it like this week, I was like, come on.
Yeah.
Like that's like Star Wars and Doctor Who have always been very different, you know. We have A New Hope. We have Underworld. They're just not in the same ballpark. But it's a fun thing to think about. It's like we've brought back this popular sci-fi franchise from the 70s. It's huge. It's on cans of Pepsi. Walkers are giving away those Tazos, like with all Star Wars characters on them. There's toys in the shops. People are queuing up. I remember going to see The Phantom Menace at the Dominion Cinema in Edinburgh, and there was just kids just having lightsaber fights like in front of the screen before the film started. It was huge. Absolutely huge. And in a way, I think Doctor Who in 2005 does actually come, I think, as close as Doctor Who will ever come to replicating that. You know, that massive wall in Toys R Us.
Froobs. I do think the Phantom Menace actually pushes Doctor Who further away from being a thing, because BBC television can't do it. It's, you know, you could argue that Star Wars is the beginning of the decline for classic Doctor Who, because people go and see Star Wars and then turn on Doctor Who.
Well, Michael Grade certainly did. Yeah. That's his whole argument, wasn't it?
And I think Doctor Who fans, and perhaps people at the BBC as well, have the wrong idea of what Doctor Who can be. I don't think it was ever going to be that. It doesn't mean it can't be a massive franchise. We've seen it do that a couple of times, you know. But it's certainly in the Matt Smith and the David Tennant eras, when Tom Baker and John Pertwee were the Doctors. It wasn't a franchise in the sense we know now, back in the 70s. But, you know, that sort of success back then, you translate it to today, and sure,
it was huge. I mean, it was in sort of 1970s Britain.
Yeah,
terms,
cereal boxes and
merchandise
and
lollies, toys, Tom Baker and Liz Sladen turning up to Downing Street in costume for like a children's party at Christmas. Like it is those times, isn't it? The kind of the Pertwee Baker eras and the Tennant and Smith eras. But it's never going to quite. I think that's the thing. Remember when we're getting nostalgic for 2022. Remember when Russell comes back again, and there is this idea that what they're going to do because they're on Disney Plus, they're going to make it this huge franchise. And older, more cynical people like you and me were like, maybe let's just make some episodes first. Because I don't think Doctor Who quite has that kind of global appeal.
I think if Doctor Who had that global appeal, that they were like, we've been able to bottle this and ultimately turn it into a film, which is what the 90s was for. It would have happened in the 90s, it would have happened in the 70s, and it would have happened around 2010. And there were people trying at all of those points, and it never happened. But there's some people, we talk about the quintessential Britishness of Doctor Who, and maybe that's the appeal and the charm, but it's also the thing that prevents it from being that A-list franchise. It's a B-list franchise, and it always will be. And you could argue sometimes it's a C-list franchise or further down, but, you know, that's a different podcast. And I think, when Russell came back, like, everybody mistook Disney Plus going, this is a massive platform, when actually it's a fairly niche platform that has X amount of million subscribers worldwide that get X amount of million viewers. It's more akin to an old cable package than perhaps what people think of, like, a billion people are going to be watching Doctor Who every week. But that's a different story. So Doctor Who and Star Wars have never really been bedfellows. It feels even more comfortable with Star Trek, perhaps, but even then, I don't think there's a massive comparison. So we get these people together, and they predict the future of how you could bring Doctor Who back. So what are the key points that really stuck out to you of what they get right, what they get wrong, all those things?
I think Paul Cornell's great when he says, on sort of like how you would sell Doctor Who. And it's like, if you sold Doctor Who once more as someone like Tom Baker says fun things, is interesting to watch, and has chemistry with his companion in panto pastiches of recognisable movies. That is the Russell T Davies template in 2005, ultimately. That's what they do. Is that the indefinable magic of
Maybe.
Doctor Who? I don't know, but it does. I think that is a really good point. It's not about the lore, as we've kind of talked about. It's about the adventure. It's about the friendship. That's always the stuff that stuck with me when I watched it. It was like, you just love those characters, love spending time with those characters in these kind of like big sci-fi adventures. They were a little bit like Frankenstein or a little bit like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, you know?
Yeah. And I think Cornell is actually the one that nails most of it. And he goes, nobody would want to do Doctor Who with all the baggage intact. What puts TV producers off about science fiction is all the gobbledygook, which when we look at the Leekley Bible, you're a little bit like, I can absolutely see why an exec at the BBC is reading this and going, how do we sell this to the same audience that like Bugs and Crime Traveller?
Yeah. Nobody likes Crime Traveller. Sorry, Mark. Sorry.
Cornell even says the people who made shows like Bugs didn't want the SF label anywhere near them because to TV people that signifies incomprehensible dialogue and expense, which I think up until the return of Doctor Who, and this isn't just down to Doctor Who, but when we get that big explosion of genre, which is, as much down to the superhero genres and things like that, it was this impenetrable thing that, we've looked at all these shows for Too Hot for TV, and it's very much sci-fi by the back door. You've got to sell the drama elements first. But then I think Russell sold the drama elements first,
Exactly, yeah. That's exactly what he does. And everybody kind of says that throughout this. There's a lot of comments about sort of having a sort of good sort of chemistry with the companion. Like Gareth Roberts says that, like, you need a better emotional context for the Doctor and the companion. We get that, and everybody's kind of in agreement that it would be the 50-minute. But then that creates its own problems because Russell kind of points out that, well, all right, this is amazing though when you actually look back. It's now that the money argument comes back in. If it was, say, a series of 13 50-minute episodes, that means 13 batches of new sets. Nightmare. And obviously he gets round that by because I think in that same bit, he talks about how you would probably do individual episodes and then maybe you do a 2-part finale.
Yeah.
Obviously, when he comes to take on the show, he goes, you need like 3 2-parters to kind of, shore up some of those sets.
Yeah. He says, I'd go for the Babylon 5 solution. Not that I've ever watched it. But if I hear the word story arc one more time, that'll come back to bite him. Self-contained stories, maybe. Only maybe trying a 2-parter towards the end of the first series and some ongoing plot ticking away, which is personal, not epic. Which, makes sense. And that is kind of what he does. But he will go heavier on the story arcs as he gets into it. But also, this is still... Story arcs do start to creep into drama in general in the sort of preceding half a decade between this and Doctor Who coming back. I mean, it's Deep Space Nine, isn't it, where they were told you cannot have linking things from one story to another, and they just slowly snuck them in. I'm right in thinking that, right?
You're right, yeah. And so from about season 4, so they've got Voyager, and they're kind of told that Voyager's the sort of next-gen replacement. They go, do we move on now? But the X-Files as well is the big one. I think the X-Files it got to be a kind of network show that did enough kind of Monster of the Week episodes that then got to sort of tell this very long story that, I mean, once you sort of do the whole thing, it all kind of falls away a bit, but it's, that's kind of what it was. There was an overarching plot.
I'm also interested in the elements that people are interested in keeping. The TARDIS is the main one. Paul Cornell says an odd hero in an odd costume. Stephen Moffat says the police box and a frock coat. And Cliffhangers, interestingly. So he's obviously he also says weekdays at 8 p.m. rather than Saturday night.
Yeah.
Because the Saturday night thing comes up quite a lot. That perhaps...
I think Russell says weekday evenings as well at some point, I think. But yeah, crucially, when they say Saturday night, they don't mean the old sort of tea time Saturday night slot. They mean the kind of Jonathan Creek, Bugs, Crime Traveller slot between the Lottery and Casualty, or wherever it used to be, which is a bit later. And I suppose that's kind of when the Capaldi era kind of goes out. It's around that kind of 8 o'clock time.
Yeah, it's as close to the watershed as you can possibly get. And isn't there one episode that creeps into like 9:15 or something like that?
In terms of finishing time and stuff, yeah.
Paul Cornell says maybe not monsters because nobody does rubber well here. And he goes probably not the Daleks because of legal stuff.
I mean, again, quite prophetic because obviously there was that whole wrangling about it in 2005.
And they talk a bit about casting as well.
Yeah.
And I think this is where Russell gets it right in his version, and these guys all get it wrong because they're still thinking of the Doctor in a classic mold. Stephen Moffat goes, although I love Peter Davison and Paul McGann, probably 2 of the best actors in the role, I don't think young, dashing doctors are right at all. He would then go on to cast Matt Smith.
Yeah.
Gatiss says, I think there's a case for casting David Collins, Jeffrey Belden, John Castle.
I burst out laughing when I read that. I was like, of course Gatiss wants to cast Jeffrey Belden in the 1990s as Doctor Who.
It is such the wrong approach.
Yeah.
And, we'll get into what he thinks.
Who is it that did the interview? Sorry, the DWM journalist that actually sort of wrote this.
It was Gary Gillett was the...
Gary Gillett. So Gary Gillett mentions Jerome Flynn. Now, at this point, Jerome Flynn is Soldier. He's, Robson and Jerome.
Yeah.
Up on the roof. Just 2 white guys singing Motown songs because they've been on the telly. But actually, I think he would have actually been quite good.
Yeah.
In the late 90s, actually, as Doctor Who.
And he's the sort of person that you'd consider because he's a current name. He's not David Collins. He's just bizarre.
God bless Gatiss, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah. They sort of stew around these ideas a little bit, and it is interesting how much they get it right and the little things they get wrong. Do you think any of these people could have brought back the show?
I think Lance Parkin is very sort of self-deprecating and honest when he sort of says it wouldn't be me.
Yeah.
Because he's not really known for television.
He was a storyliner on Emmerdale, I think.
Yeah.
Who ever wrote a full episode or anything.
If he would have had the clout to get it. I think at this stage, I think Gatiss, Moffat and Davies are the ones to watch, really.
Yeah, they are the three front runners.
And it would have been Roberts. Roberts probably would have got pulled in as a writer, maybe. Probably Cornell as well. I mean, it's basically what happens.
It's interesting that Parkin is the only one that doesn't end up writing for the series. And again, it's sort of that thing of Lance Parkin is a good writer and writes some great Doctor Who, but for whatever reason, his career didn't take him in that path. And so he, as far as I know, doesn't come within shooting distance of it. Who knows? Maybe he was the person that wrote the Teeth and Claw film script that was unusable.
Oh, yeah, they've never named who that was, yeah.
I have been told that they had a list, not for Tooth and Claw, but they had a list of 3 sort of extended universe Doctor Who writers that Russell wanted to give a chance for.
Oh, right.
And it went so badly with the first one that they didn't approach the other 2, and the other 2 writers knew their names were on the list and were a little annoyed at the person who screwed it up. But, you know, there we go. And I always wonder whether it is that Tooth and Claw slot that is where it goes wrong, and they go, I don't know, Lawrence Miles.
Yeah.
It sort of gets the right people. I would probably think, not knowing Moffat and Davis at the time, I would come away thinking Paul Cornell is the man for the job.
Yeah, I think reading it now as a slightly more relaxed 39-year-old, Stephen Moffat, I find Stephen Moffat's writing about Doctor Who being a children's show utterly magical.
Yeah.
Like, that idea that Doctor Who is a children's show, but it's a children's show that adults enjoy. And when you watch Doctor Who, and when Doctor Who's really good, it makes you feel like a kid again. Because that's exactly like what good Doctor Who does for me.
Yeah,
like,
agreed.
And I think actually that is, I think, the way you should be approaching the show. And that is the way Russell approaches the show when he brings it back in 2005. Not when he brings it back in 2023, but that's a separate conversation.
I think Moffat, also, you get that, like, for all the clever twists and turns and, like, brilliant conceptual ideas Moffat comes up with, a lot of the time it is just that, I'm excited like I was when I was 9 and first saw Remembrance of the Daleks. There is a lot of that in his era. I think that's more of the appeal to that era than what Moffat fans would want.
The thing I most found interesting, which I don't remember ever reading before, well, ever picking up on before, is Gatiss throwing shade at Curse of Fatal Death.
To his future colleague and best friend.
Yeah, just saying, I didn't think it was that good. Rowan Atkinson was rubbish. Richard E. Grant was rubbish.
Yeah.
But Hugh Grant was good. Maybe we should get Hugh Grant. And then obviously we maybe almost did.
Yeah, indeed. Is there much more you want to say on this article? Because it's not a pitch for Doctor Who.
It's not a pitch. I mean, I think it is interesting that, and I think it kind of, I suppose, sums up who these 2 guys are, is that in this article, Russell T Davies is very much about the logistics.
Yeah.
And he's got a really good producer's brain on kind of like what Doctor Who needs to be to actually get back on screen. Whereas Moffat's very kind of magical and kind of more, he's really interested in kind of what the show is and what the idea of the show and what that means in kind of 1999 and the turn of the millennium, and why we kind of need Doctor Who, but not necessarily on how you would sort of bring that to life in a kind of practical manner.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the others all come up with good ideas. But ultimately, I think we leave it on the words of Russell T Davies, who said, "God help anyone in charge of bringing it back. What a responsibility." Words that would haunt him for the rest of his life, I'm sure.
Well, no, because, I mean, God bring anybody who brings it back again. A
brilliant time capsule of that era of television, of that era of Doctor Who fandom, and what was leading us to the future of the show. I'd love somebody to do a version of this now with some interesting people in television who are perhaps starting out, and see if any of them in 20 years' time end up running Doctor Who.
I just don't think they'd be allowed to now.
No, that's very
because it's an officially licensed magazine.
Yeah, well,
maybe we should set up a fanzine that kind of.
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt.
You've got connections. We can get some good interviews. I can interview people. I've interviewed people. Let's do it.
Too hot for TV.
So the final thing we're going to look at is another Doctor Who magazine article on Doctor Who 2001, which came in Doctor Who magazine 500 in 2016. Now, I tried to get hold of the pitch document to ask people who might know, but it's just not out. It's not out there, so we're going very much off the article. There's no point in me doing news at the time for 2016 because it's not relevant to 2001.
Sure. Yeah.
But where we were in 2001 in terms of Doctor Who was the BBC Books were doing the Earth arc in the EDAs. The VHS range was about 18 months off winding up because they'd released it all. Well. DVDs were picking up. The Eighth Doctor's first season at Big Finish was going on. BBV was wrapping up their audio range, and the Caldor City audio range was just starting up. So the brand isn't quite dead, but it's certainly at a point of transition, and we are starting to see bits of the 90s fall away to make way for the 2000s, and we're 2 years off the announcement the show's coming back and 4 years off the show actually coming back.
Yeah it's interesting because I suppose it definitely didn't feel like that at the time. I think by this point I was kind of maybe falling away a little bit from Doctor Who. But yeah, it's interesting because the Earth arc, that was very much like bring it back to basics, kind of do a new version of Doctor Who with the Eighth Doctor. You've got the Big Finish range, which is like we've got Paul McGann, we've got like an actual series of Doctor Who, and I think for me, that was the stuff I was focused on, and I wasn't really that arsed about any of the other stuff. But I did have that kind of nagging sense in the back of my head that was just like, is this all the Doctor Who is now? Just a kind of audio drama and then a QuickTime animation on. I know it was not QuickTime before anybody writes in.
It was Real Player,
on the BBC
Mark.
website.
Yeah, I think Doctor Who was very much my dirty little secret at the time. I would listen to Big Finishes, but I wouldn't want anybody to know I listened to a Big Finish late at night in my bedroom.
Yeah, you're getting them out of Forbidden Planet, a little paper bag. And
but I'd never given up hope that they would bring it back. But around 2001, I reckon my hope was at its lowest because we were so far from the TV movie. It had been half a decade.
Yeah, God, I know, yeah, that's mad to think, isn't it?
And when you're young, half a decade's a long fucking time.
Yeah.
Not now.
Absolutely.
Not now. They're going
No, fucking some blink in it. Blink of an eye.
Do you think UK TV was warming towards science fiction again at this point?
It's interesting, actually, in the Bigger Than Star Wars article, the thing that I really picked up on was the talk about how the BBC's drama department was just broken.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of talk about how ITV are killing it at the moment with drama. And if you read Paul Hayes' Long Game, that there's a lot about that. A lot about how one of the reasons maybe Doctor Who didn't come back wasn't because of the rights, wasn't because of this, wasn't because of that. It was just nobody, like, the drama department was a bit rudderless.
Yeah.
Like, nobody kind of had an idea of, like, how to kind of steer it. And I can't think of any kind of UK sci-fi stuff from 2001. I mean, is it like Randall and Hopkirk?
Randall and Hopkirk's the one. And that's the knowing wink, isn't it? It's sort of, although going back to it, discovering that it wasn't quite as funny as
And League of Gents is kind of big now, in 2001. It's quite a big thing. But again, like, these are things that, it's like you say, a knowing wink.
Yeah.
It's like, I loved the League of Gentlemen, and I love Vic and Bob. I'll hold my opinion on Randall and Hopkirk's the Randall and Hopkirk reboot because I've watched them for years. But yeah, it still doesn't quite feel like we're there yet. No. But we are there, I suppose, in the careers of at least one of the people that we're about to talk about, that it could have happened.
Well, so the people we're talking about are Mark Gatiss, BAFTA winner at the time, Mark Gatiss.
Yes, yeah. He's still a BAFTA winner.
Yeah, he's still a BAFTA
winner. They haven't taken it off him.
I would say recent BAFTA winner, like...
Yeah.
Then we've got Gareth Roberts, who's a jobbing TV writer, mainly soaps. And then we've got the editor of Doctor Who magazine and partner of Gareth Roberts, Clayton Hickman.
Who must have written some scripts for Big Finish at this point, right?
He had. And as a magazine editor and graphic designer, I imagine he helped put together the pitch deck on a very visual level to make it more appealing. Do they feel like a team that could make it work?
Yes, actually. I think, but it would be, I think you would run the risk of it would be the kind of Randall and Hopkirk style Doctor Who. It would be a Doctor Who that's maybe a bit self-aware.
Yeah.
that maybe isn't necessarily what you need at this point. You need something that's kind of new and fresh. And that's not to say that this, because actually I think there's stuff in this pitch that actually would probably have worked at the time. But I wonder if if that team, in terms of writing and their sort of they're not. I wouldn't say the writers with a populist appeal. Put it that way.
No, this sounds like I'm being dismissive of them, but they are peddlers of nostalgia. And that's not to say they haven't made some interesting, innovative programs, Doctor Who, things like that. But Gareth Roberts is never better than when he's pastiching season 17. Clayton Hickman and Gareth Roberts together when they're pastiching Doctor Who as a whole. Mark Gatiss writes the most traditional of traditional Doctor Who stories you could get, which there's definitely in a season of 13 episodes, you want a couple of episodes like that.
Yeah.
And then the League of Gentlemen stuff is perhaps a sign that sort of you can shoot television well, because League of Gentlemen looks a lot better than a lot of other dramas on TV at that time. And you've also got things like Spaced and stuff, which,
yes,
there's directors really taking care and going, we're going to try and shoot this in an innovative way. So,
well, that's it. We're in the early days. I mean, I think it's maybe gone a bit too far now, but we are in those early days of the kind of sitcom or the comedy or the sketch comedy show being shot like prestige telly.
Yeah.
And it working really well, and it feeling kind of fresh and vibrant and a kind of new spin. Whereas now it just feels like, do you know what? I wouldn't mind a studio bound sitcom, actually.
Yeah. we are at the other end of that now, where you're just like, just tell me some gags in a living room, please.
Yeah, with about 3 cameras focused on you from different angles. Yeah.
So, what do we think of their take on the character of the Doctor and the companions?
So there's a bit. Let's see if I can get the line, because because it kind of seems to cause some controversy. So we've got the Doctor, who they're going for the kind of Hartnell-esque older Doctor, hopefully played by Derek Jacobi, because he was in Gareth Roberts' episode of Randall and Hopkirk. But I could see it. I can see it
Derek
Jacobi as the Doctor. And a kind of young couple that I guess you would maybe do a will they, won't they kind of thing with. Great. I think that I could see that working.
I think that's a valid take, especially for a bunch of Doctor Who fans who still see the hero as completely sexless.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. This is it. So it's Graham Kibble-White that writes this, isn't it? And he says there's one exchange, in fact, one solitary word, that really seems to unlock this version of the character. Here he is talking to his other companion. So Dan, bloody hell, it's just a police box on the outside. And then, in here, Doctor Who. Yes, well, don't labour the point, son. Son, a singularly undoctorish word, surely. Now, I like son. Clayton Hickman likes son. And Gareth Roberts sort of says it was the idea to not make it sort of, hello, my boy. But I think Gatiss' description is absolutely beautiful, which is, I've always felt there's something reassuring and yet slightly terrifying about that word. It's the sort of thing a policeman would say. And it's like, yeah, because,
in some ways, it's the sort of stuff that RTD injects and ejects at the same time. It's not quite there to the point of the northern Doctor who speaks like everybody else, but it is going, we can't have a lapel clutching, my dear, what was that?
Yes, yeah.
Dear girl, so they know that the Doctor's mannerisms and the way he speaks can't quite be the same, but they haven't quite nailed it. But I do think they get what is Doctor Who. They say it's scary, funny, charming, unique, unmissable, populist talked about television. And most of those things you could say about the character of the Doctor too. So I think the idea of Derek Jacobi in a Victorian frock coat or whatever, wearing trainers.
Yes. Yeah.
And what is Jacobi? Late 50s, early 60s at this point?
At this point, yeah. Because they make that, I can't remember who it is that says it, but they sort of met Jacobi at a thing. Or they'd heard an anecdote about Jacobi where he's done with doing sort of Shakespeare and serious drama. He just wants to have a laugh.
Yeah.
And you can see that because he goes off and does that mad episode of Frasier where he plays like a Shakespearean actor who's become known for a sci-fi show. So yeah, he is kind of, at this point in his career, kind of playing with people's expectations of the guy from I, Claudius.
Yeah.
So you could see him
Yeah.
as taking on the role of Doctor Who in this kind of version.
You cast those two young parts right. Maybe, I don't know, Sheridan Smith, somebody like that, who
Yeah.
would have been a regular face for people watching 2 Pints of Lagers around that time as well.
Yeah, Royal Family as well.
Yeah. It's like, actually, I can see that combination of people working. Again, I don't know whether it's, 20 years later, that version of it's still going just about, but
Yeah.
I don't know whether it sits on a Saturday night.
So this is what I was going to say about how I think it would work. So they talk about it. It would be like which is mad. There's a lot. We'll maybe get to this in a second. The kind of timidity of the pitch, but to kind of their thing of kind of solving the budget problem is to do it as 3-parters. So 7 3-parters, 21 episodes. Each episode being half an hour long.
Yeah.
Now, what I think they should do, 45-minute episodes, 2-parters, Sunday, Monday. Because I remember growing up, my mum and dad used to watch, I think the BBC, I think this was around this time, to try and kind of pull back the audience from ITV. They did these kind of crime doubles. So it was like Waking the Dead, DL and Pasco, all these kind of crime shows, Silent Witness. They would do like part 1 of the story on a Sunday night at 9 o'clock, part 2 of the story on Monday night at 9 o'clock. I think a version of that.
Yeah, you show that
would
at
work.
7:30.
Yeah.
In the Good Night Sweetheart slot.
Indeed. And then you stick it on just before or after EastEnders on a Monday night.
Yeah.
Sorted.
No, I agree. I think because nobody was making drama like that at that point.
No.
And so that's very much a Doctor Who fan's idea of how Doctor Who should work, because you've got to have cliffhangers. We know that 4-parters, there's too much padding in episode 3. So,
yeah.
And, Cartmel was heading that way, and J&T, like they started doing 3-parters. And it just seems bizarre to me that in 2001 they thought that's how they would do it. So what about you mentioned the timidity of the pitch?
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, there's this mad thing where they start sort of telling people, oh, look, we know Doctor Who was shit in the 1980s, right, but bear with us. What the fuck? Nobody cares about your thesis on why Doctor Who got cancelled in the 1980s. Get to the fucking nub of why your version of Doctor Who is going to be great.
Yeah.
It seems like a really weird kind of, look, we're so sorry to be just another sort of letter writing in sort of offering you our version of Doctor Who. We know it's a bit shit, but we think we can make it work. It seems like such a weird way to kind of, like, this is why I'd love to see the full pitch document, because I want to know how long that sort of little thing about 80s Doctor Who went on for.
Imagine if it was the opening paragraph.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's like a black archive level of detail of why Doctor Who sucked in the 80s.
What am I reading? So there's that. And then I think they themselves kind of just say they weren't bold enough.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of the pitch kind of going, look, we know it would probably be expensive, or look, we know this and we know that, but we've got this kind of idea, and it's like quite apologetic, when actually I think what you need in the pitch document is to just be like, bang, because there's great ideas in here. I think there's the episode outline where it all takes place during like one of those like live time team digs, and they dig up a car that's been buried for centuries. That's a great idea for a Doctor Who story.
And the thing is, any TV exec reading that is going to go, I can see how that would be a cheaper episode. They don't need to be told that's the cheap one. They don't need to be told that when you go to ancient Egypt, you'll see one CGI shot of a pyramid and then go inside and it'll all be set in caverns and things like that. It's, you're selling yourself down already.
Yeah, definitely. Because again, I think they also nail the reboot of it all, so it's kind of a soft reboot. It's like, it doesn't explicitly say that this is the first Doctor. It doesn't explicitly say that this is the 9th Doctor. It's just the Doctor who has these kind of weird gaps in his memory, so that he's kind of meeting the Daleks for the first time, but an audience watching it would be like, wait, what? You know what the Daleks are? We all know who the Daleks are. I think that's a really fun idea, that if they'd kind of sort of spun that out a bit more, could have actually made it last for a couple of years.
And what do you think of this? So we meet the Doctor and he's very much having some time off running an antique shop in a village.
So I didn't quite understand if he was having time off running an antique shop in a village and this, because it's like the pilot would have been some big companies taking over the local castle or something, isn't it? And people are started going missing. So I didn't quite understand if it was like the Doctor had been there for ages, just living in this antique shop, or if he'd just moved in to kind of get a sense of what was going on, like the Doctor sometimes does. But yeah, I think as an idea, because they've done what Chris Chibnall did when he brought Doctor Who back. He went back to an unearthly child.
Yeah.
And kind of went, all right. So Chibnall goes back and goes, well, you had all these identifiable figures for the family at home. Let's do that again. They go back to it and go, well, all right, it was a junkyard. He was a kind of slightly irascible, slightly unknowable old man. And you had these kind of young characters that kind of he took under his wing. And they had adventures and he couldn't control the TARDIS and they didn't know where they were going, but that was kind of the fun of it. That was the chaos of it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Russell and Stephen Moffat kind of go to that Pertwee era.
Yeah.
I think when they look at their kind
a
of...
bit more of a family vibe of like
a
base in Britain, whereas here it feels a little bit like, oh no, they're going to go off in Adventures of Time and Space and they're not sure whether they're going to be able to get back. And then they even say, don't they, the final episode is like, will they stick around for another season or not? And Mark says something about you actually wouldn't know what he was going to do next in terms of the Doctor. He would be on your side, but maybe in a very roundabout method. It's difficult that because we instinctively want our heroes to be heroes. So there's a bit of the Hartnell thing, there's a bit of the Capaldi thing there as well.
Tom Baker as well. I mean, you know, Tom Baker's terrifying to a kid at times.
I think, I mean, it's easy to say this in hindsight with Russell's version working, but I think the quintessential Britishness of an English village and the old man was probably the wrong choice. Not that Derek Jacobi wouldn't be a great Doctor Who.
No.
But it feels more in line with that Randall and Hopkirk thing. Of course, you open with a montage of London in rows, not a little English village. It's like little English villages signify classic Doctor Who. Cities is new Doctor Who.
Well, and also if you're looking at a global audience doesn't like a little English village is where weird little British independent films get made.
Yeah.
London with its red buses and, you know, Big Ben and all that kind of thing. That's where the big movies, that's where Paddington's from. Yeah. That's, you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of thing. It's either it's a big upper class mansion like Downton Abbey, or it's like slap bang in the city of London. That's how you get global appeal.
100%.
You know.
But I do think this would have worked. I think you might have got 3 or 4 series out of it that ran for a few years. But I think at the end of it, there'd be no question of the show coming back until probably around now. You know, it would have run till 2005, and then somebody somewhere would have gone, oh, do you remember that silly old program Doctor Who that was pretty good in the early noughties, and there was a bit of it before? But I don't think you've got 20 years of runtime out of this.
No.
And I think it's probably something that would have found more an audience with my parents than with a young generation of children.
Yes, I think that's very true. But then, I don't know, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. You get the kids in via the parents. That's how I got into Jonathan Creek. That's how I, watched a lot of things through that. But that's not necessarily the best approach.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, I think it depends on the casting of the companions as well and how likeable they are to a young audience, because Rose is a young woman, but she's still an adult to kids, you know? So it's about making these companions not feel like authoritative figures that the kids find sort of more relatable and then just fall in love with the Doctor, I think. I'm also reminded a little bit of Scream of the Shalka with this.
Oh, right, okay.
It's the Doctor coming into a couple's life in this village where all is not well, and it's trying to do the reboot thing. The Doctor's lost his memory. Derek Jacobi's there, albeit in a different role. And it's interesting that the sort of this version and Scream of the Shalka are a bit, again, I know Shalka's got to be in one way pared back because it's a web flash animation, but the other side of things, actually they can do anything. But they've gone the core ingredients to Doctor Who. If you're going to try and sell it for the telly, it's the Doctor, a couple of companions, the TARDIS, wipe the memories, get rid of the continuity, but also we can't go too big with the plot. We can't do a sprawling epic. It's got to be contained like Doctor Who always was. And Russell T Davies goes, we're going to have armies of Daleks flying in space, and we're going to have Autons in the city of London. Don't tell anybody it's Cardiff. And we're going to the end of the world. So once again, I think we just come down to the ambition that Russell was right.
Yeah, I mean, Russell had the ambition, and I think he had an understanding of kind of how they could make it work. And then we were flying. I think we got the best version of Doctor Who that was on offer at the kind of turn of the millennium.
Indeed. Anything else you want to say about Doctor Who 2001?
I just think it is interesting that bigger than Star Wars, what does the success of the Phantom Menace tell us about the sort of future of Doctor Who? It's interesting. I can't remember if it's actually in the pitch. It probably isn't, because the books wouldn't have been as, although they were getting there, I suppose, but aren't as majorly popular. But there's a lot of mention of Harry Potter in this.
Yes.
Like, they were kind of viewing it as a kind of like, well, actually, let's go for that kind of slightly weird kooky Britain, that kind of magical realist kind of Britain. Like, let's do that. And also, I think it does feel of a piece with like Jonathan Creek and Randall and Hopkirk and all these kind of things, because they explicitly mention those shows in their pitch. Like the female companion's a bit like a young Maddie from Jonathan Creek.
Yeah.
It's tapping into what else is on the telly at that point and kind of placing Doctor Who within that.
Do you think Doctor Who was destined to come back as a hit when it did? Or do you think these prove that
Oh, that's a good question.
It could have just been a modest success or indeed a flop?
I don't think it was destined to come back as a hit. I think it was always destined to come back in some form. I think law of averages, I suppose we had a role. I mean, I love the TV movie. We all love the TV movie now. But if we're looking at it just purely as a kind of relaunch of Doctor Who, it's not great.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite do what it needs to do. So hopefully, it's like sort of second chance. Yeah, I think it's down to the vision. I don't think it's down to destiny. I think it's just we got lucky that we got Russell and we got that vision and that cast.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people's hard work, and I'm sure I would have been happy with the Gatiss and Hickman one and Roberts, but it wouldn't. We probably would be sitting here now talking about it like you, Jackson, and Richie talked about Randall and Hopkirk. Just like, well, it was all right. I liked it as a kid, but it's a bit weird looking back at it now.
So we're sort of at a point in Doctor Who where we're in the show's future is somewhat uncertain. We know the BBC want to continue making it, which we didn't necessarily know in the 90s.
That's true.
And we've got a Christmas special in just over a year's time.
Yeah.
We've got a spin-off this Christmas that, everybody's very excited about. The show's destined to have a little bit of a hiatus and hopefully a relaunch. We're kind of at a point where television's an uncertain landscape and we need somebody to reinvent the show. But do you think there's anything we can learn from either the big lore-heavy version of Doctor Who that Leekley wanted to do, or this compact, cheaper version of the show that Gatiss and Roberts were pitching? Do you think there's anything that potential future showrunners could pull from these, rightly or wrongly?
I think the problem we had with the past couple of years is that it has been quite fixated on the lore. Not in a, I suppose not in an overt way, in the way that Leekley Bible is, but in a way that we're stopping the story for the Doctor to tell Ruby about his granddaughter in Shoreditch for no other reason than that. It's not part of the plot. It's not, So I think we're at a point now where Doctor Who is so big and it's so massive that it's quite daunting for a new audience.
Yeah. And
I think crucially that's the problem with getting a new audience. It's been around for 20 years and that's just the new stuff.
Yeah.
It used to be that you would say to somebody, "Oh, where do I start with Doctor Who?" And you go, "I'll just start with Christopher Eccleston. Don't you get to the classic stuff later if you want." You know? Now, where the fuck do you even have that conversation? And I think that's the problem. I do think that's the problem. And I think whatever Russell did with the last 2 years, I think it still would have got the exact same ratings.
Yeah.
I just think people are we're fans kind of, exhausted and kind of a bit like, I think it needs to break and it needs to kind of come back. I think a hard reboot is maybe a bit too harsh at this stage, but it needs to come back in a way that I think is not beholden to the past.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like you can just jump on and just watch this guy or girl and their best friend having adventures in time and space, and sort of like really focus in on what I think Doctor Who is and always has been. It's about companionship and adventure and a bit of romance and maybe learning a little bit about science and history along the way.
Well, I think that's a wonderful sentiment to end it on. I personally think the next reboot should just be a full adaptation of the Leekley Bible. Lore, and more lore. That's what I want.
Too hot for TV.
Well, Mark, thank you for joining me today on this trip through some never-weres of Doctor Who history. If people want to find you on the internet, where can they find you?
I'm on Blue Sky, like all the other, people of the metropolitan liberal elite. just Mark Donaldson .bluesky.social. Did do a Doctor Who podcast called On the Time Lash, In the Time Lash.
Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. No.
Well, one day we shall come back. That's all I'll say.
Excellent. Well, this is definitely the last episode in the series now. I'll be back over Christmas with the Too Hot for TV advent calendar, and then at some point early next year, not January, we'll do another run of not Doctor Who's. But this has been an incredibly long run, and it's only because I've basically been in Prague alone that the only socialising I did was Doctor Who podcasting. Otherwise, I would have finished months ago. But thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you to all my guests on the 55-odd episodes that we've done.
Well, I was going to say, this season there's been more episodes in this season than there are weeks in a year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because the ones with Jackson were quite often released alongside the main episodes. So, yeah, that's where we ended up. I wasn't expecting to do this. In fact, I thought it'd be about 10 episodes. But look, it is what it is. And I'm very happy that people want to listen, that people wanted to come on and talk about stuff. So it's been a hoot. But there will not be 58-odd episodes in the next run. But never say never. But until next time, I've been Dylan.
I've been Mark.
And this has been Doctor Who Too Hot for TV.
Too hot for TV.
The pilots work better than the Bible, but it's a weird thing to say. But it is
all this shit together.
What,
That's the first
what's
thing.
going on there?
The second thing is who's contacting Daz?
My phone just started playing a message that I got this morning. That's weird.
Okay.
That won't be me.
Who is contacting Daz, though? That's
Exactly. My mate Robbie, it turns out. And here he is now. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So the